Never in my life did I imagine that a simple taco delivery would change everything I thought I knew about trust, secrets, and the dangerous games people play with each other's hearts. What I discovered behind those convent walls wasn't just shocking. It was a warning that every woman needs to hear before it's too late. My name is Marcus, and I've been delivering food for 3 years now. I thought I'd seen everything: drunk college kids, lonely elderly people who just wanted someone to talk to, busy families grabbing dinner after long days. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on that cold Tuesday evening when I got a call to deliver 20 tacos to St. Catherine's Convent on Maple Street. I remember checking the address twice. A convent? Nuns ordering tacos? It seemed odd, but hey, everyone's got to eat, right? The order was placed by someone named Sister Margaret, and she specifically requested that I deliver them to the side entrance after 8 p.m. Please be discreet, the note said. Ring the bell twice, then once more. As I loaded the warm bags into my car, something felt different about this delivery. Maybe it was the way the evening fog was rolling in, or maybe it was that strange feeling you get when you know you're about to walk into something you don't understand. But I brushed it off. I needed the money, and this was going to be a good tip. 20 tacos isn't a small order. The drive to St. Catherine's took me through the older part of town, where the streetlights cast long shadows and the houses seemed to watch you as you passed. The convent sat at the end of a tree-lined street, a massive stone building that looked like it had been there for over a century. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed how quiet everything was. No cars, no lights in most of the windows, just this heavy silence that seemed to press down on everything. I grabbed the bags and walked toward the side entrance Sister Margaret had mentioned. The path was lined with old oak trees, their branches creating a canopy so thick that barely any moonlight filtered through. My footsteps echoed on the stone walkway, and I found myself walking slower, more carefully, as if I was afraid of disturbing something sacred. The side door was smaller than I expected, made of dark wood with iron hinges that looked like they belonged in a medieval castle. There was a small brass bell next to it, tarnished with age. I followed the instructions. 2 rings, then 1 more. The sound seemed to echo through the building, and then silence. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Just as I was about to ring again, I heard footsteps from inside. Slow, measured footsteps, like someone who wasn't in any hurry but knew exactly where they were going. The door opened just a crack, and I saw a pale face peering out at me. "You must be the delivery," came a soft voice. "I'm Sister Margaret." The door opened wider, and I got my first real look at her. She was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes but something tense about her expression. She wore the traditional black habit, but there was something about the way she held herself that made me think she was carrying a heavy burden. 20 tacos, I said, holding up the bags. "That'll be $47.50. She nodded and stepped aside to let me in. "Please, come in for a moment. I need to get the money from upstairs." I hesitated. Usually, people have their money ready, especially for orders this size. But there was something about her tone, almost pleading, that made me step inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it, that heavy, almost suffocating atmosphere that some places have. You know what I'm talking about. Those spaces that hold secrets, where the air itself seems thick with unspoken words and hidden truths. The hallway was dimly lit by old-fashioned wall sconces that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. The smell of incense hung in the air, mixed with something else, something that reminded me of my grandmother's house when she was sick. That subtle scent of medication, of worry, of people trying to hold something together that was slowly falling apart. "Wait here," Sister Margaret said, gesturing to a wooden bench against the wall. "I'll be right back." As she disappeared up a narrow staircase, I sat down and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that was growing in my chest. That's when I started noticing things. Little things that, individually, might not mean much, but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. First, it was the voices. Soft whispers coming from behind closed doors along the hallway. I couldn't make out words, but there was an urgency to them, a tension that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then I noticed the doors themselves. Most of them had small windows, but they were covered with heavy curtains from the inside. Why would nuns need that much privacy from each other? I heard footsteps above my head, But not just Sister Margaret's. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving back and forth, as if people were pacing or having some kind of urgent discussion. At one point, I could swear I heard someone crying, a soft, broken sound that seemed to seep through the old walls and settle in my bones. The minutes stretched on. 5 minutes became 10, then 15. I started to wonder if I should just leave the tacos and go, but something kept me rooted to that bench. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that protective instinct that kicks in when you sense someone is in trouble. Whatever it was, I stayed. That's when I heard the argument. It was coming from somewhere upstairs, voices raised just enough that I could catch fragments through the old building's thin walls. Can't keep doing this. She's going to find out. Too dangerous now. The voices were female, desperate, scared. These weren't the peaceful, contemplative nuns I had imagined. These were women in crisis, women who were hiding something big. I found myself leaning forward, straining to hear more. Every instinct I had was telling me that whatever was happening in this place, it wasn't good. And the longer I sat there, the more I realized that I might be witnessing something that could put me in danger too. Sister Margaret finally returned, but she wasn't alone. Another nun followed her down the stairs, this one younger, maybe in her 30s, with red-rimmed eyes and hands that shook as she clutched her rosary. They whispered to each other at the bottom of the stairs, and I caught enough to make my blood run cold. "He's been here too long," the younger nun said. "What if he heard something?" Sister Margaret glanced at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. "It's fine, Sister Catherine. He's just a delivery boy. He doesn't know anything." But I did know something. Maybe not the specifics, but I knew that these women were trapped in something that was eating them alive from the inside. I knew that whatever they were hiding, it was big enough to make them terrified of a taco delivery guy who might have overheard the wrong thing. Sister Margaret approached me with an envelope. "Here's the payment," she said, but her voice was different now. Colder. More careful. "Thank you for waiting." I took the envelope, and that's when I noticed her hands. They were shaking, and there were small bruises on her wrists, the kind you get when someone grabs you too hard. My mind started racing. What kind of situation were these women in? What kind of danger? "Are you okay?" I found myself asking, even though every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to take the money and run. The question seemed to surprise her. For a moment, her careful mask slipped, and I saw the real woman underneath, scared, exhausted, desperate for someone to help her. But then Sister Catherine stepped forward, and the moment was gone. "Everything is fine," Sister Catherine said firmly. "Thank you for the delivery. You should go now." There was no mistaking the dismissal, but there was something else too. A warning. These women wanted me gone, not because they didn't need help, but because they were afraid of what might happen if I stayed. Afraid of who might find out that I had been there, that I had heard too much. I stood up slowly, the envelope heavy in my hand. "If you ever need anything—" I started, but Sister Catherine cut me off. "We won't," she said. "Goodbye." They walked me to the door, and I could feel their eyes on me as I made my way back to my car. But just as I was about to get in, I heard something that made me freeze. A window had opened on the second floor, and a voice, a different voice, older and more authoritative, called down. "Sister Margaret, bring him back inside. Now." The terror on Sister Margaret's face was unmistakable. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to be begging for help, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Mother Superior would like to speak with you." Every fiber of my being wanted to get in that car and drive away as fast as I could. But I couldn't leave these women. Whatever they were caught up in, they were victims too, and walking away would mean abandoning them to whatever fate awaited them upstairs. I followed Sister Margaret back inside, this time up the narrow staircase to the second floor. The hallway here was even dimmer, lit only by a few small lamps that created pools of yellow light surrounded by deep shadows. The walls were lined with doors, all closed, all silent now. But I could feel eyes watching me from behind those doors, women who were too scared to show themselves but too curious to look away. At the end of the hallway was a larger door, made of the same dark wood as the entrance but with intricate carvings that seemed to move in the flickering lamplight. Sister Margaret knocked softly, and a voice from inside said, "Enter." The room beyond was like stepping back in time. Heavy wooden furniture, thick carpets, and walls lined with religious paintings and crucifixes. Behind a massive desk sat a woman who could only be Mother Superior. She was probably in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. But there was something about her that set off every alarm bell in my head. Maybe it was the way she smiled without any warmth reaching her eyes, or maybe it was the way Sister Margaret seemed to shrink into herself in this woman's presence. "So," Mother Superior said, her voice smooth as silk but with an undertone that made my skin crawl, "You're our delivery boy. How much did you hear while you were waiting downstairs?" The question was casual, almost conversational, but I could feel the danger beneath it. This was a test, and my answer would determine what happened next. I looked at Sister Margaret, who was staring at the floor, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were white. "I didn't hear anything," I said. "Just came to deliver tacos and get paid." Mother Superior studied me for a long moment, and I felt like a mouse being examined by a snake. Finally, she nodded. "Good. That's very good. Because sometimes people think they hear things that aren't really there. Sometimes they imagine conversations that never happened. And sometimes, those imaginings can get people into very serious trouble." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Whatever these women were involved in, Mother Superior was willing to do whatever it took to keep it secret. And I was starting to realize that I might be in more danger than I had thought. "However," she continued, opening a drawer in her desk and pulling out a small wooden box, "sometimes God sends us exactly the person we need at exactly the right time. Tell me, young man, are you the kind of person who helps people in need?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." She opened the box and pulled out a roll of cash that was easily 10 times what the tacos cost. "Sister Margaret and some of our other sisters have been struggling with certain temptations. They've been making poor choices, getting involved with people who don't have their best interests at heart. They need guidance, discipline, and most importantly, they need to learn the consequences of betraying trust." As she spoke, I started to understand what I was really looking at. This wasn't a convent full of holy women living peaceful lives. This was a prison, and Mother Superior was the warden. These women were being controlled, manipulated, and probably much worse. The bruises on Sister Margaret's wrists, the fear in everyone's eyes, the whispered arguments. It all made horrible sense now. "I need someone reliable," Mother Superior continued. "Someone who can help me keep an eye on our sisters when they venture outside these walls. Someone who can make sure they don't fall back into their old habits or reconnect with people who might lead them astray. Someone who understands the importance of discretion." She was offering me money to become part of whatever sick system she had created here. She wanted me to spy on these women, to report back on their activities, to help her maintain control over their lives. And if I refused, well, I was starting to understand that refusal might not be an option. "What do you say?" she asked, extending the roll of cash toward me. "Are you interested in a more permanent arrangement?" I looked at that money, and then at Sister Margaret, who was still staring at the floor but whose shoulders were shaking now. I thought about all the times in my life when I had taken the easy path, when I had minded my own business and avoided getting involved in other people's problems. This was one of those moments when you have to decide what kind of person you really are. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly, "but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just here to deliver tacos. That's all." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mother Superior's smile disappeared, and for the first time, I saw her true face, cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. "I see," she said softly. "How unfortunate. I was hoping we could come to a mutually beneficial arrangement." She stood up and walked around the desk, moving with the predatory grace of someone who was used to getting exactly what she wanted. "You know, young man, people who refuse my generosity often find that life becomes complicated for them. Their employers receive complaints about their behavior. Their landlords suddenly discover lease violations. Their families start hearing disturbing rumors about their activities. The threat was clear. If I didn't play along, she would destroy my life piece by piece until I had no choice but to come crawling back to her. I had seen this kind of manipulation before, but never on this scale. This woman had built an entire system designed to trap people and make them dependent on her for everything. Their safety, their security, their very identity. But here's what she didn't understand about me, and what I learned about myself in that moment. I had grown up watching my mother get trapped in exactly this kind of relationship. I had seen how it started with small favors and seemingly generous offers, how it gradually escalated into complete control, how it destroyed her sense of self-worth and made her believe she deserved the treatment she was receiving. I had sworn that I would never let anyone do that to me, and I sure as hell wasn't going to help someone do it to others. "You can try," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "But I think you'll find that some people are harder to break than others." For a moment, genuine surprise flashed across her face. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she saw as beneath her. But then the mask slipped back into place, and she returned to her chair. "Very well," she said. "Sister Margaret will see you out." As we walked back down the hallway, I could feel Mother Superior's eyes boring into my back. But I also noticed something else. Some of the doors we passed were cracked open now, and I caught glimpses of faces watching us. These women had heard everything, and for the first time in probably years, they had seen someone stand up to their captor. At the bottom of the stairs, Sister Margaret finally looked at me directly. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "She'll make your life hell now." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll still have a life. What about you? What about all of you?" Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "We can't leave," she said. "She has things, documentation, photographs, recordings, things that would destroy us if they ever got out. We signed contracts, made commitments. Some of us have families that depend on the money she provides. We're trapped." I reached into my pocket and pulled out one of my business cards. Not my delivery service card, but one for a side job I did helping people with computer problems. On the back, I quickly wrote my personal cell phone number. "Keep this hidden," I told her. "If you or any of the other women ever decide you want out, call me. I might not be able to solve everything, but I know people who can help. Legal aid lawyers, domestic violence counselors, people who specialize in getting people out of situations like this." She took the card with shaking hands and quickly tucked it into her sleeve. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." "Because everyone deserves to be free," I said. "Because no one should have to live in fear. And because sometimes, when you see something wrong happening, you have to decide whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem." Sister Margaret opened the door for me, and I walked back out into the night air. It felt different now. Cleaner, fresher, like I could breathe again after being underwater. As I got into my car, I looked back at the convent. Most of the windows were dark, but I could see a few figures silhouetted against the dim light, watching me leave. I drove home that night thinking about what I had witnessed and what it meant. Here was a group of women who had probably started out looking for meaning, purpose, maybe even spiritual fulfillment. Instead, they had found themselves trapped in a web of control and manipulation that was slowly destroying them from the inside out. But here's the thing that really got to me. This wasn't unique. What I had seen at St. Catherine's was just a more extreme version of something that happens to people every day. People get trapped in relationships, jobs, living situations where someone else holds all the power and uses it to control every aspect of their lives. They start out thinking they're getting help, support, or security, but gradually they realize they've traded their freedom for the illusion of safety. And the worst part is how it happens so slowly that you don't notice until it's too late. It starts with small compromises, little concessions that don't seem like a big deal. "Just let me handle the money, you're not good with finances. Don't spend time with those friends, they're a bad influence on you. You don't need to work, I'll take care of everything." Before you know it, you've lost your independence, your support network, your sense of self-worth, and your ability to imagine a life outside of this person's control. I had seen this pattern in my mother's life, and now I was seeing it in these nuns' lives, but on a scale that was almost hard to believe. Mother Superior had created an entire system designed to break people down and make them dependent on her. She used their faith, their vulnerabilities, their past mistakes, and their fears to keep them under her thumb. And the scary part was how effective it was. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Sister Margaret and the other women trapped in that convent. I did some research and found out that St. Catherine's had been the subject of several investigations over the years, but nothing had ever stuck. Mother Superior was smart. She kept everything just legal enough to avoid serious trouble, and she made sure that anyone who might testify against her had too much to lose to risk speaking out. But I also learned something else. There were resources available for people in these situations, if they knew where to look and had the courage to reach out. Organizations that specialized in helping people escape controlling relationships, legal aid groups that could help with documentation and contracts, counselors who understood the psychological damage that this kind of manipulation could cause. The problem was getting that information to the people who needed it most. People like Sister Margaret and her fellow nuns, who were isolated from the outside world and convinced that they had no options. 3 weeks after that night at the convent, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, I heard a whispered voice that I barely recognized as Sister Margaret's. "Can you meet me?" she asked. "Tomorrow, at the coffee shop on 5th Street, at 2 o'clock? I told her I'd be there, and when I arrived the next day, I almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing regular clothes, jeans and a sweater, and her hair was visible for the first time since I'd met her. But it was her eyes that struck me most. They were still scared, but there was something else there too. "Oh, I can't go back," she told me as soon as I sat down. Last night, Mother Superior called me into her office and told me that I was going to start recruiting new sisters. She wanted me to target women who were vulnerable, recent divorcees, women struggling with addiction, women who had lost their jobs or their homes. She had it all planned out, how to approach them, what to promise them, how to gradually draw them in. She paused and looked out the window, as if checking to make sure she hadn't been followed. That's when I realized that I wasn't just a victim anymore. She wanted me to become a predator too. And I couldn't. I wouldn't do that to other women. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're doing the right thing. It's going to be scary, but you're stronger than you think." Over the next 2 hours, Sister Margaret, whose real name, I learned, was Rebecca, told me the whole story. How she had joined the convent 8 years ago after a messy divorce left her feeling lost and ashamed. How Mother Superior had seemed so understanding and supportive at first, offering her a place to heal and find purpose. How gradually, the support had turned into control, the guidance had become manipulation, and the promise of spiritual fulfillment had become a prison of fear and dependency. But she also told me about the other women. Sarah, who had been there for 12 years after her parents had basically sold her to Mother Superior to pay off gambling debts. Maria, who had joined after struggling with drug addiction and now lived in terror that Mother Superior would reveal her past to her children. Jennifer, who had tried to leave 3 years ago and had been so thoroughly destroyed by Mother Superior's retaliation that she had attempted suicide. "How many are there?" I asked. 15, Rebecca said. 15 women who are trapped just like I was. And Mother Superior is always looking for more. That's when I realized the full scope of what we were dealing with. This wasn't just about helping one woman escape a bad situation. This was about dismantling an entire system of abuse that was destroying multiple lives and would continue to destroy more lives until someone stopped it. But here's what I learned from Rebecca that changed everything for me. The reason these women stayed wasn't just because Mother Superior had dirt on them or because they were financially dependent on her. It was because she had convinced them that they deserved this treatment, that their past mistakes made them unworthy of anything better, that no one in the outside world would ever accept or love them the way they were. This is the most insidious part of psychological manipulation. It doesn't just control your actions, it changes how you see yourself. It makes you believe that you are fundamentally flawed, that you are lucky to have someone willing to tolerate your presence, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection and security you can get. I had seen this in my mother's relationship with my stepfather. Even when he was clearly treating her badly, she would defend him, make excuses for him, blame herself for his behavior. "If I was a better wife," she would say, "he wouldn't get so angry. If I was more attractive, he wouldn't need to look at other women. If I was smarter, he wouldn't need to make all the decisions." It took years of therapy after he finally left for my mother to understand that none of his behavior was her fault, that she hadn't deserved any of the treatment she received, and that she was worth so much more than what he had convinced her to accept. The same thing was happening to Rebecca and the other women at St. Catherine's. Mother Superior had spent years convincing them that they were broken, that they needed her guidance to function in the world, that they would fail miserably if they tried to live independently. And after hearing it for so long, they had started to believe it. But sitting in that coffee shop, watching Rebecca talk about her decision to leave, I could see that the spell was breaking. She was remembering who she had been before Mother Superior got her claws into her. She was starting to believe that she deserved better, that she was capable of taking care of herself, that she had value beyond what she could provide to someone else. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Help," she said simply. "I know you said you knew people who could assist women in situations like this. I need a place to stay while I get back on my feet. I need legal advice about the contracts I signed. I need help understanding what resources are available to me. And—" She paused, looking directly into my eyes. "I need someone who believes that I can do this, even when I don't believe it myself." Over the next several weeks, I helped Rebecca navigate the process of building a new life. We connected her with a legal aid lawyer who specialized in coercive contracts and helped her understand that many of the agreements she had signed with Mother Superior were not legally enforceable. We found her temporary housing at a women's shelter that specifically served survivors of psychological abuse. We helped her apply for jobs and benefits, and slowly, gradually, she started to build the foundation of an independent life. But the real work was emotional. Years of psychological manipulation had left Rebecca with a deeply damaged sense of self-worth. She second-guessed every decision, apologized for things that weren't her fault, and constantly worried that she was being selfish or ungrateful for wanting basic human dignity and respect. This is something that people who haven't experienced this kind of control often don't understand. The damage isn't just practical, losing your money, your housing, your job. The damage is psychological. When someone systematically undermines your confidence, your judgment, and your sense of self-worth over a period of years, it changes how your brain works. You literally lose the ability to trust yourself, to make decisions, to believe that you deserve good things in life. Recovery from this kind of abuse isn't just about getting away from the abuser. It's about rebuilding your entire sense of identity, learning to trust your own instincts again, and developing the emotional tools you need to recognize and avoid manipulative people in the future. But here's what I learned from watching Rebecca go through this process. It is possible. With the right support, the right resources, and most importantly, the willingness to do the hard work of healing, people can recover from even the most severe psychological manipulation. They can learn to set boundaries, to recognize red flags, to value themselves appropriately, and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than control and dependency. 6 months after Rebecca left St. Catherine's, she called me with an update. She had a stable job, her own apartment, and was slowly rebuilding relationships with family members she had been isolated from during her years at the convent. But more importantly, she was starting to help other women who were in similar situations. "I volunteer at the women's shelter now," she told me. "I help new arrivals understand their options and navigate the legal system. And you know what the most important thing I tell them is? That they are not crazy, they are not weak, and they are not alone. That what happened to them was real, that it was not their fault, and that they deserve so much better than what they were getting." But the story doesn't end there. Because while Rebecca was building her new life, Mother Superior was working to replace her and continue her system of control. Through contacts Rebecca had maintained with some of the women still at the convent, we learned that the recruitment had intensified. Mother Superior was specifically targeting women who were going through divorces, women who had lost jobs, women who were struggling with addiction or mental health issues. She had refined her approach, too. Instead of waiting for vulnerable women to come to her, she was actively seeking them out. She had people working in social services, in support groups, in churches, identifying women who might be susceptible to her particular brand of manipulation. This is when I realized that helping Rebecca escape was just the beginning. As long as Mother Superior was free to continue her operations, there would always be more victims. The only way to really solve this problem was to expose the entire system and make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. But taking on someone like Mother Superior directly was dangerous. She had money, connections, and a long history of destroying people who crossed her. She also knew how to work within the legal system just well enough to avoid serious consequences while still maintaining complete control over her victims. However, she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the women she was trying to control. She thought that years of manipulation and isolation had broken them completely, that they would never have the courage or the ability to fight back. But she was wrong. Rebecca started reaching out to the other women still at the convent, carefully, cautiously, letting them know that there were options, that escape was possible, that there were people on the outside who would help them build new lives. One by one, they started to respond. Sarah was the second to leave, then Maria, then Jennifer. Each woman who escaped became a resource for the others, sharing information about available services, offering emotional support, and most importantly, serving as living proof that it was possible to break free from Mother Superior's control. The legal case that eventually brought down Mother Superior wasn't built on any single dramatic revelation. Instead, it was constructed from the accumulated testimony of 8 women who were willing to speak publicly about their experiences. Each woman's story corroborated the others, creating a pattern of behavior that was impossible to ignore. The charges included fraud, coercion, and operating an unlicensed facility for vulnerable adults. But more importantly, the publicity surrounding the case exposed Mother Superior's methods to the wider community, making it much harder for her to find new victims. Today, St. Catherine's Convent is closed. The building has been sold, and Mother Superior is serving a 7-year sentence. But the real victory isn't in her punishment. It's in the lives that were saved and rebuilt. Rebecca now runs her own non-profit organization that helps women escape controlling relationships. She specializes in cases involving religious or spiritual manipulation, but her services extend to anyone who has been trapped by someone who uses psychological control to maintain power over them. The most important thing, she told me recently, is helping women understand that they have more strength than they realize, that they deserve respect, kindness, and the freedom to make their own choices, that their past mistakes don't define their worth as human beings, and that it's never too late to start over. So what does all of this mean for you? Why am I telling you this story about a taco delivery that turned into something much bigger and more complicated? Because I learned something that night at St. Catherine's, and in the months that followed, that I think every woman needs to hear. There are people in this world who are skilled at identifying vulnerability and exploiting it for their own benefit. They know how to present themselves as helpers, as saviors, as the answer to your problems. They know how to make their control feel like love, their manipulation feel like guidance, their abuse feel like discipline that you deserve. These people exist in every area of life. They can be romantic partners, family members, employers, spiritual leaders, friends, or even people in positions of authority who are supposed to be helping you. They are experts at finding your weak spots, your fears, your insecurities, your past traumas, your unmet needs, and using those vulnerabilities to gradually gain control over your life. The process usually starts small. They offer help during a crisis, provide emotional support when you're feeling isolated, give you attention when you're feeling invisible, or promise security when you're feeling vulnerable. In the beginning, it might genuinely feel like the best thing that ever happened to you. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the help becomes dependency. The support becomes control. The attention becomes surveillance. The security becomes a prison. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're so deeply entangled in their system that escape seems impossible. Here are the warning signs that I learned to recognize, both from my own family's experience and from working with the women from St. Catherine's. They isolate you from your support network. They convince you that your family doesn't understand you, that your friends are jealous or negative influences, that you don't need anyone else as long as you have them. Gradually, you lose touch with everyone who knew you before this person came into your life. They control your access to resources. They convince you to quit your job because they'll take care of you financially, or they take control of your money for your own good, or they move you somewhere where you don't have transportation or access to communication with the outside world. They undermine your confidence and decision-making abilities. They constantly criticize your choices, tell you that you're too emotional or irrational to make good decisions, and gradually convince you that you need their guidance for even the smallest matters. They use your past against you. They collect information about your mistakes, your traumas, your insecurities, and they use that information to shame you, control you, or threaten you when you start to resist their influence. They create a system where you're always walking on eggshells. You never know what mood they'll be in, what will set them off, or what the consequences will be if you displease them. This constant state of anxiety makes it difficult to think clearly or plan for the future. They convince you that you deserve bad treatment because of your past mistakes or character flaws. They make you believe that you're lucky to have someone willing to tolerate your presence, that no one else would ever love or accept you the way you are. Most importantly, they make you believe that leaving would be impossible or catastrophic. They convince you that you can't survive without them, that you would fail miserably on your own, that the consequences of leaving would be worse than staying. If any of these patterns sound familiar to you, I want you to know something that Rebecca and the other women from St. Catherine's learned. None of this is your fault. You are not weak, you are not stupid, and you are not trapped. The person who is controlling you has specialized skills in psychological manipulation that they have probably been developing for years or even decades. The fact that their tactics worked on you doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means they're good at what they do. But here's the other thing I learned. These systems of control only work as long as the victim believes they have no other options. The moment you start to understand that you do have choices, that there are people who will help you, that you are capable of building a life on your own terms, the whole system starts to fall apart. Recovery from psychological manipulation takes time, support, and professional help. But it is absolutely possible. Every woman,